I'm sorry, this is part two now. I hit the button again and it stopped. And because I was pretty much into the other discussion, I didn't want to have to repeat myself and do it all over again. So you're getting two videos. I'm sorry. All right? Sorry. I apologize. But Brecht and Artaud is what I grew up with. Even though they wrote in the early part of the 20th century and did all of their work in the early part of the 20th century, um, they were highly influential in the latter half of the 20th century and on into the 21st century. So they're always spoken about. He wanted the ritual, Mr. Artaud. Mr. Brecht wanted you to watch something and then go out and change the world. His theater is extroverted. It's outside. It has nothing to do with what's going on inside because no emotions are supposed to happen except for maybe frustration and anger. He was a socialist. He was a communist, though he never joined the party. But he was German, and Artaud is French, as I mentioned. Anyway, Brecht wanted you to just look at a staged event that depicted something that was not socially right, an injustice. And then he wanted you to get up and go out of the theater and change the injustice, correct it, correct the world. His theater was a political theater. And he got in trouble when he emigrated here. Because of the communism, he had to leave Germany in the 1930s, and he wasn't Jewish, but that's where other people came over from Germany. But Brecht was hounded by the Nazis, so he came to America, but he didn't like. Excuse me, he didn't like it. It was too commercial for him, too capitalistic. After the war was over, he was invited back to East Germany, which was communist. That was when Germany was divided between East and West Germany, and he was invited. And in East Berlin, the communist government gave him a theater, the Berliner Ensemble, which is still in Berlin. It's still the National Theater that does other work, but is the stronghold for Brecht's plays. One of my teachers used to say that Brecht was a better playwright than he was a polemicist, theorist, because he did create characters that people felt for. So those were those people. Then in the 50s, we get a book compiled by a man named Martin Esslin. I didn't really talk about him at all. It's called The Theater of the Absurd. One time somebody asked me what Waiting for Godot was about, and I said it's about waiting. It has no plot. Curtain goes up, two men on a stage. They're waiting. They're waiting for Godot, or Godot, as they say in Britain, Godot. They play games. They play hat tricks. They talk. Think of you and your friend waiting for the subway on a subway platform or in a bus stop waiting for a bus. What do you do while you're waiting? It's comedy, but it goes nowhere. At the first end, the guy says, I'm going home. And he says, oh, yeah? And then the curtain drops. Nobody goes anywhere. Next day, or the next time the curtain goes up, they're still there. They're still waiting. And you get the idea that they're waiting day after day after day after day. And Godot never comes. Spoiler alert, Godot never comes. But it's about waiting. He has a play, Beckett. Beckett is a Nobel Prize winner, an Irishman who left Ireland. He lived many years in Paris, and he wrote very absurdist plays. I was in a play called Line that was not based, but in that same idea of the absurdity of life. Now, nobody said, I'm going to write this Theater of the Absurd piece. This is what Estlin saw. He looked at the theater of the later half after the war, 20th century, and he starts with Ubu Wa. Ubu. Papa Ubu. Remember him? Merde. Merde. First word on that stage in 1896. Again, it's a crazy, crazy, mixed up, nonsensical, farcical play. People are being murdered all over, but the blood is like spurting all over the place so that you're laughing at it. And you have to begin somewhere, so Estlin begins with him. But the playwrights, with Jarry, Alfred Jarry, who created Ubu Roi, King Ubu, and everybody calls them Papa Ubu or Mama Ubu. And he talks about UNESCO. UNESCO has a play that's the longest running play in Paris. It's opened in the 1950s and it's still there. And I went to see it, and it is very funny, but it's in a very very small little theater, and it's called The Bald Soprano, and I think it's Le Cantatrice Chauve, something like that in French. But anyway, um, where the two people in their apartment or their living room are sitting there, and the clock strikes. And after a while, you start to count the strikes as an audience member, and it goes to 13. Right away, you're in the absurd world for a clock to strike 13 times as opposed to 12, right? And that's where the laugh is. Then they're going to have a couple come to dinner. So another couple come in. So they greet them, and they leave the two alone. And this man and this woman have a dialogue. And they're just sitting there talking. No action, really. Hello, my name is so-and-so. Hello, my name is so-and-so. I am from Paris. Oh, that's nice. I'm from Paris, too. Well, I live in Belleville section of Paris, in the 10th arrondissement. Really? You do? Isn't that interesting? I also live in the 10th arrondissement. Well, I live on the Rue de whatever, say the Rue de la Paix, which is not in the 10th, by the way. And the woman says, oh, I live there too. And I live at number 75. You do? I live at number 75. After this whole conversation is over, we discover they are man and wife. Right? And you're laughing. You're just laughing. The thing is funny. But he also has a very serious play called The Lesson, where a professor and a student, and it turns out the professor kills the students. So that's not so funny. See, after the Second World War comes the time of the Cold War. And that was a very difficult time, very stressful time to people to live, because both the Soviet Union and the United States had the atomic weapons, and the threat of an atomic Third World War was always there. It still is. It still is. Aren't we trying to get Iran to stop experimenting with nuclear activity, etc., nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, as Mr. Bush 1 said? I mean, no, that was Bush 2. I'm sorry, Bush 2. One tends to forget about Bush 1. Anyway, so it turned out that we could blow ourselves up. What's the point of life? What is it? Sartre has a play, existentialism is Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy, where it's just life. That's it. You exist and then you don't. There's nothing before it, there's nothing after it, and that's it. And the only thing you can do is the best you can. To prove his point about no life, he wrote a play, mostly philosophical writings, but he wrote a play that people still do. It was called We Close, or it's translated into English as No Exit. And it takes place in a room, two women and a man. And they are locked in the room. They can't get out and all. And let's see. One woman is lesbian, so she's in love with the other woman, and the man is in love with the lesbian. And of course, nobody can have each other, right? And the other woman who loves the man. And the whole thing comes out to hell is other people, because they find out that they're dead and they are in hell. And they're going to spend all of eternity in this room together. Absurd. So that's that too. There's lots of experiments going on in this field. Unfortunately, everything is on hold now because of the pandemic, but we theater practitioners are borrowing from each other. That's another thing that I like about this part of Centuries. There are no rules anymore. There really aren't. We can borrow from each other. Tennessee Williams has a very realistic play called The Glass Menagerie that is, at the beginning, a character comes out who we find out is named Tom, And he comes out and he looks out at the audience and he says, "This is a memory play. I remember my mother." And then the mother comes out on stage because there's a kitchen, not a kitchen, a living room, a dining room table, and it's behind him. So he's out of the play, telling us about people who are in the play behind. Right? This is selected realism. This is a very 20th century American concept of breaking the fourth wall and talking. I saw a production on Broadway the last time it was revived on Broadway, where even when she was laying the dishes on the table, there were no dishes. She was standing there doing this and putting things down on the table that didn't exist. We didn't see it. And even later, when the people sat, when he joined his sister and mother at that table, they ate as if there was food, but there was nothing on that table. It's a memory play, right? Even the great American play by Arthur Miller called Death of a Salesman, the whole thing takes place in one night in Willie's mind. So Willie's the main character, this salesman who's down and out, and he's reliving memories. So that even when he relives the memory of his brother, the bedroom door opens and the brother is standing there and says, "When I walked into that desert, I came out a rich man." I'm not quoting verbatim, but people come in and out of exits and entrances in the apartment because it's visions, it's people. Do you lay late at night and when you can't sleep and your head is full of stuff? Do you see it? You see it in your mind's eye. Well, Miller was bringing what Willie was seeing in his mind's eye to our eye. He was bringing it to life. So you couldn't do this in 1789, say, but in 1947 you could, or 6 or 8. I can't remember when it was actually. I think Death of a Salesman was 1949, actually, but that's mid-century. Think of what's going on now. So that's why I wanted to do the bits about the Asian theater just before we got into all of this, because the Asian theater did teach Western practitioners that you can rely on the imagination of the audience. Allow the audience to really become part of the play by filling in the gaps. Harold Pinter, a very famous at a time, he passed a few years back, but Harold Pinter was a British writer who also won the Nobel Prize, now that I come to think of it. He has no stage directions. The actor can do what he wants. I mean, there is a thing, there's stuff there. I mean, there's a plot, maybe. I think he even ends with Pinter. Oh yeah, there's Pinter's name right there. He does end with Pinter. He's got up here Beckett, Ionesco, Adamov, Genet, Albee, Edward Albee, great American writer, Arabal, Gunter Grass, German, Pinter, and Simpson. And he's talking about those things. Well, he talks about individual playwrights. So the chapters are just on the playwrights. Chapter 3, Eugene Ionesco, Theater and the Anti-Theater, and stuff like that. Then the tradition of the absurd, the significance of the absurd. How does he start that chapter off? What are you saying? The significance of the absurd. The theater of the absurd forms part of the unceasing endeavor of the true artists of our time to breach this dead wall of complacency and automatism, and to reestablish an awareness of man's situation when confronted with the ultimate reality of his condition. As such, the theater of the absurd fulfills a dual purpose and presents its audience with a twofold absurdity. That kind of goes back to what Artaud was saying. I didn't read you some of Mr. Artaud's table of contents, the essays. The Theater and the Plague. Interesting read at this time in our lives. But the idea was that the plague came in Europe in the 13th century, whatever it was, the great big Black Death, wiped out half the population. He thinks the theater should do the same thing. It should wipe out all existing forms that came up to now, the beginning of the 20th century when he's writing. No more big theaters, no more texts. In fact, no more masterpieces is one of them. The theater and cruelty. Theater of cruelty was his concept. Artaud we're talking about. Not so much. It's the same idea that Brecht had as well. The audience no longer sits in the dark. You don't complacently sit there and just watch a story unfold, maybe even fall asleep. The idea is to shake you up, to be cruel to you, the audience member, so that you can go out and take it with you and look at the world around you. It was like a wake-up call these people did. Brecht invented signs that came in. He put songs in his plays, because a song in the middle of a drama is like, where'd that come from, right? There was a whole group of people in Italy in the 30s that was called the Futurists. Wow. They used to glue the programs to the chairs so that when people came in to pick up their program, they put them on the chairs instead of handing them out and glue them. You were already embodied. You were already taking part in the performance by trying to get the program off your seat. So that's what this is all about. I'm not going to go on about it. There's really a lot to it. Let that last hour-long show. Take your time and watch it. Little at a time, from the BBC. Let that help explain some of this. And some of the practitioners like Robert Lepage up in Canada, Adrian Minushkin in Paris, and all. Study the list, because there are things on the list we did not talk about and I did not write about that might show up on the quiz and all. So, okay. So, I'm signing off. I'm sorry that this is in 2 parts, but you can see I really didn't want to have to go over that first part again. Be well, be healthy, and take care. We're going to have one more video, I think, next week. Even though I know there's a holiday, we're going to do the producer. We have to talk a little bit about the producer. It might be just a written thing. All right. So, take care. Bye now.